Once the group leaders were confirmed, Lancey called them forward and handed each a curious little object. No bigger than a pen, carved from smooth darkwood with a tiny crystal embedded at the top. "Keep this on you at all times," Lancey instructed, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. "If your group encounters danger, blow into the whistle. It's enchanted to alert me directly." Ray turned the device over in his hand. Lightweight, simple, but something about the glint in Lancey's eyes made the warning feel off. There were 8 groups in total, each with 8 students. Once final gear checks were completed, the students stepped into the dense woodland ahead. 5 hours to hunt and survive before regrouping at the forest's edge. Just before Ray's team disappeared beneath the canopy, Lancey called out, "Remember, anything can get you in the forest." There was a pause, and then, just for a moment, a faint curl at the edge of his lips. A smile that wasn't a smile. Ray caught the meaning. Not a warning. A challenge. The forest swallowed them whole. Thick shadows danced between towering trunks. Dappled light flickered across leaves that whispered secrets in the wind. As they advanced, the team left trail markers on trees, small slashes or carved initials to ensure they wouldn't lose their way. "I hate that Lancey guy," Monk muttered under his breath. Martha ruffled his hair with a soft laugh. "Don't let him live in your head. Focus. You know what they call this place?" Monk shook his head. "Insect forest," she said grimly. "I hate bugs." Ka was already swatting at invisible insects, scratching like something had crawled under his skin. Dan snorted. "Toughen up. What's the worst a bug could?" Thump. A giant ladybug, easily the size of football, emerged from the shadows, clicking its jaws. Before the group could react, 20 more appeared, crawling over roots and branches, their glossy red shells gleaming ominously. Sylvia didn't hesitate. "Form up. Insects always swarm. Don't let them surround you." Martha drew first blood, an arrow whistling past Ray's ear and pinning one ladybug to a tree with surgical precision. Then chaos erupted. Ian, having recently committed to the Axe Club, cleaved through 2 ladybugs with a brutal crosscut, the sheer weight of his twin axes splitting them down the middle. Dan cursed as his spear thrust failed to catch the agile bugs, until he hurled it mid-spin and skewered one mid-flight. Kyle, true to form, shouted insults mid-attack like a madman. "I bet your mother was a cockroach." Sylvia moved like water, shield raised, sword striking with surgical rhythm. She blocked, parried, slashed, all while keeping an eye on the rest of the team. But not everyone was thriving. Gary struggled. He landed hits, but every move looked strained, every step sluggish. When he finally felled a ladybug, he dropped to one knee, panting as sweat dripped from his brow. Ray noticed. Gary wasn't just tired, he was faltering. But Ray didn't intervene. Not yet. 3 ladybugs turned toward Ray, flanking him. He stood still, sword undrawn. "What are you waiting for, Ray?" Sylvia called. "Draw your weapon." But Ray ignored her. Instead, he centered his breath, focused his senses, and let his ki gather in his fingertips. His skin hardened like tempered steel. The first ladybug lunged. Ray responded with a swift, claw-like strike. No blade, no magic, just raw ki. The insect split apart in a flash, carved into 5 neat pieces. The other 2 hesitated, senses primal enough to understand danger. They tried to flee. Ray didn't let them. 2 blurs of movement, 2 clean strikes. Both ladybugs collapsed, unmoving. Just then, Monk emerged from behind a tree, carrying a limp insect over his shoulder. His movements were so silent, even Ray's sharp perception had nearly missed him. While Monk said, eyes wide, "That was key, wasn't it? You've already got that much control." Ray smirked. "Looks like I'm not the only one who's been practicing in secret." Monk's ears turned red. With the skirmish over, the team moved quickly to extract beast crystals. Their agreement was simple. The one who landed the final blow claimed the reward. No arguments, no drama. Ray had already received 2 crystals through his system. He only needed 1 more. But to avoid suspicion, he carved open all 3 insects, masking which one the crystal had come from. They pressed deeper into the forest. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. butterflies with wingspans larger than eagles, scarab beetles with armored shells like iron plates, all of them unnaturally large, all of them aggressive. Still, the group adapted. They fought smart, efficient, until they met the red velvet ants, larger than the ladybugs, faster, smarter, jet black bodies, with streaks of crimson velvet across their armored exoskeletons. Ray had just finished carving into his third ant when he heard it. Ah! A scream. Raw. Real. He spun around, just in time to see Gary stumble backward, an ant clamped viciously onto his arm. Its mandibles had sunk deep, tearing into muscle. Blood ran down Gary's forearm, dripping from his fingertips. Ray's eyes narrowed. Time slowed. Gary's scream tore through the clearing. Blood streamed down his arm as the red velvet ant's jagged mandibles dug deeper into his flesh. It didn't make sense. These ants were only basic tier beasts. For someone like Gary, who had once stood at the top, this shouldn't have happened. Ian was the first to reach him. With a grunt of effort, he grabbed the ant by its segmented body and pulled. The creature resisted, its legs flailing wildly, but Ian's grip held firm. With a final wrench, the mandibles tore free from Gary's arm, spraying blood across the mossy earth. "Hold it steady," Gary muttered through clenched teeth, his face pale. Ian nodded, tightening his hold. In one swift motion, Gary picked up his sword and brought it down. The ant split cleanly in two. Sylvia and Kyle arrived moments later, their faces grim as they inspected the wound. 2 deep punctures, wide, red, angry. Not life-threatening, but painful and dangerous if left untreated. "Can you fix it?" Kyle asked, trying to mask the panic in his voice. Sylvia knelt, examining the wound. "It's not deep enough to be fatal, but we can't take chances. I'll do what I can. I'll handle the cleaning," Kyle said, already pulling out a small vial of disinfectant from his pouch. As Kyle worked, Sylvia sat cross-legged, closing her eyes and channeling her ki. The air around her shifted slightly, as if drawn toward her palms. When the bandaging was done, she pressed her hands over Gary's arm. Dan watched, intrigued. "What's she doing?" "Ki infusion," Ian explained. "It boosts the body's natural healing. Not as strong as magic, but effective, if you know what you're doing." Sylvia's brows furrowed with concentration. Beads of sweat formed along her temple. She didn't say a word. Meanwhile, Monk tugged Ray aside, motioning for a private word beneath the shade of a thick oak. "Don't you think Gary's been off lately?" Monk asked quietly, his gaze flicking toward their friend. "Getting bitten by a basic tier beast? That's not like him. And during training, he's been slipping too." Ray said nothing at first, his eyes lingering on Gary's hunched form. The dark circles beneath his eyes, the sluggish movements, the way his hand trembled around his sword. "You should talk to him," Monk urged. "He won't listen to the rest of us. But you? He respects you." Ray sighed. "I'm not good at this kind of thing." "You don't need to be," Monk replied. "Just be there." Ray glanced back at Gary. Maybe Monk was right. After all, Gary had been the one looking out for him since the beginning. Perhaps it was time to return the favor. Once Sylvia finished, the group resumed their hunt. The red velvet ants had slowed them down, but they still had time left. They scattered through the clearing, collecting beast crystals and cleaning their blades. Ray ended the session with 10 crystals, 5 claimed through the system, 5 harvested by hand. Not bad for a day's work. With that, he was close to gathering enough for his first major upgrade. As the group emerged from the forest's edge, they saw Lancey already waiting with his arms crossed. Other teams were trickling in as well, dust-covered and tired. Once the final group arrived, Lancey held up a brown sack. "Tax time," he said. 10% of your crystals, Academy's cut." Groans rippled through the students, but they complied. Ray stepped forward, dropping a single crystal into the bag. Lancey raised an eyebrow. "Only one." Ray shrugged. "I only managed to get 5. Lancey's eyes narrowed. "Impossible." "A lie, maybe." He stepped forward and patted Ray down thoroughly. He checked every pocket, every hidden seam. Nothing. With a grunt of disgust, he stepped back. "TCH, I guess you really are that useless." Ray didn't flinch. He simply gave a blank nod and walked away, though inside, a quiet satisfaction stirred. They'll never find the others. The system stored his crystals in a personal inventory space. They didn't exist in the physical world unless he summoned them. It was his secret advantage, and one he had no intention of sharing. Monk caught up to him, eyeing him curiously. "Only 5, huh?" Ray flashed a grin. "Trade secret." His friends exchanged knowing looks but didn't press. While others dispersed to rest or head to the blacksmith's, Ray had something else in mind. He climbed the stairwell of the main building until he reached the rooftop, a quiet place above the chaos. The sky above was streaked with hues of orange and violet as the sun began its descent. Ray sat cross-legged on the tiles, opened his system menu, and took a deep breath. Inventory. Basic tier Beast Crystal 5. Intermediate tier Beast Crystal 1. Super tier Beast Crystal 1. With the additional 4 basic tier crystals he'd extracted manually, his tally was more than enough. He opened the absorption prompt. Basic tier Beast Crystal 5 detected. Would you like to absorb? Yes, no. He selected yes. One by one, the crystals dissolved into light as he felt them course through him, keys swirling, pressure building in his core. 83 points. 88 points. 92 points. 96 points. Only one remained. He stared at it, fingers hovering over the command. Random point gain per crystal. I need 4. Will it be enough? He clicked absorb. Maximum points achieved, 100. A breath hitched in his throat. The system vibrated faintly, the menu flickering. A new message appeared. Basic tier evolution criteria met, initiating evolution sequence. Ray's heart pounded. What comes next? He remembered the beast from the forest, the way its body had changed, slowly, painfully, over the course of a year. Would his path be the same? Would his body change? Would his memories vanish? Would he become a dragon again? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. He was evolving, and nothing—
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
As soon as the evolution notification appeared, Ray's body felt as if it were burning. He was quickly brought down to his knees. The pain was unbearable. He needed to do something. He sat down and started to meditate, just as he did when practicing gathering his ki. Focusing on the pain, he tried to imagine it wasn't there. The sensation then changed slightly. The burning turned into a prickly feeling, as if every pore on his skin was being stabbed with tiny needles. He cursed the system. He wasn't ready for this. It hadn't even given him the option to start or not. After 10 minutes, the prickly sensation subsided, but a new pain took over. His bones. It felt as if they were being torn apart from the inside out. A cracking noise echoed through his body. His bones were actually breaking down and rebuilding themselves. The process repeated over and over again. With each break, he thought the pain might become easier to bear, but it didn't. It was just as agonizing every time. Ray clenched his teeth, using all his willpower to stop himself from screaming. If anyone heard or saw him now, they would know something was wrong. Finally, the pain stopped. He had lost track of time, too focused on enduring the suffering to notice how much had passed. You have successfully evolved into a Dragon Knight. He rubbed his eyes, thinking they were playing tricks on him. But as he read the notification screen again, the words were clear. Dragon Knight. Wasn't that what they called the founders of Avrion? Or was it just a coincidence? There was no time to think about it now. He had a bigger concern. Had the evolution changed his appearance? With no mirror to check, Ray activated his Dragon Eyes skill. The first thing he noticed was that his senses had improved drastically. His vision was sharper than ever, and he could sense every person around him as if he were looking at them from an aerial view. From below, he could hear the student conversations. Though they were far away, their voices reached him as if they were speaking right beside him. Then, when he turned his attention to himself, his heart sank. His aura had changed. Instead of the pure yellow color he once had, it was now yellow mixed with a slight tint of red. Yellow represented humans. Red was for magical beasts. Purple signified the shadow plague. If what he was seeing was correct, did this mean he was now part beast? A memory surfaced. He had seen this before. When he first entered Avrian Academy, they had visited the cemetery. In the tomb of one of the Dragon Knights, he had sensed the same type of aura. His outward appearance still seemed human, which was a relief. But when he checked his status, next to race, it now read Dragon Knight. There was no use in trying to wrap his head around it now. He didn't have the answers. For now, there was another test he wanted to try. Opening his system inventory, he spotted the intermediate beast crystal still inside. Intermediate beast crystal detected. Would you like to absorb it? When he had tried this before, the system had displayed an error message. But if his hypothesis was correct, the system was now treating his body like that of a magical beast. If a basic tier beast, or in his case, a human, could only absorb basic tier crystals, then his evolution into a Dragon Knight should mean he could now absorb intermediate ones. And if he continued evolving, would he eventually return to being a true dragon? Yes. He selected the option, and the crystal slowly started to disappear. A tingling sensation spread throughout his body. Love, points earned. Ray frowned slightly, disappointed by the low number. But at the very least, he could now absorb intermediate crystals. The strength they granted still felt the same as before, and that was enough for now. Before heading back to his room, he decided to check his reflection in the school toilets, just in case his appearance had changed more drastically than he realized. Walking through the hallway, he used his sash as a scarf, lifting his hood to cover himself. He also activated his black sash skill to avoid being seen as much as possible. Once inside the restroom, he examined himself in the mirror. Nothing seemed to have changed too noticeably. His body had become slightly more muscular, and he was a bit taller, but it wasn't drastic enough to raise suspicion. Satisfied, he made his way back to his room. Everyone was already in their beds, getting ready to sleep. Sylvia was just about to turn off the lights as he walked through the door. "Oh, nice of you to join us," she said, pausing as her eyes roamed over him. Ray tensed slightly. Had he missed something? "You look a little different," she muttered, still staring, as if trying to figure out what had changed. She had a keen eye for these sorts of things. Her senses were sharp. "Stop flirting with Ray and turn off the lights," Dan shouted from his bed. Sylvia's face immediately flushed red. Without another word, she turned off the lights and went to sleep. Ray lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had a lot on his mind, more than usual. As he drifted into thought, he suddenly heard someone speaking. It was Gary. Gary had been talking in his sleep frequently over the past few days, as if trapped in a nightmare. But this time it was worse. His body jerked and shifted so much that the entire bunk bed shook. His words were slurred, impossible to make out. Then, suddenly, he shouted at the top of his lungs. "No, no, don't." Everyone in the room jolted awake at the sound of Gary's cries. Gary continued to scream words of nonsense. Monk quickly went up to see if something was wrong. The way Gary was acting, it seemed like he was being attacked. "Gary, wake up, wake up!" Monk shouted. The others had now all gotten out of their beds and could see Gary wriggling around, tossing and turning. "I don't know what's wrong with him," Monk said, visibly worried. Sylvia quickly started giving out commands. "Ian, bring Gary down here. You're the only one strong enough to hold him still. I think I can help." Ian did as he was told. He went up and grabbed Gary by both sides. Gary was still struggling as if trying to break free, but it was useless. As Ian placed Gary on the floor, Dan came over and held down his feet while Ian held his shoulders. Sylvia then placed her hands on Gary's forehead. A few moments later, he began to calm down, slowly falling back into a deep sleep. "What was that?" Dan asked. "It's something they taught us in the medical club. It's used to soothe patients who are in pain." Ian went to put Gary back in bed, while everyone else returned to their own, except for Monk. Monk looked troubled as he walked up to Ray. "You need to talk to him. He seems to be getting worse." "I will. Don't worry," Ray assured him. While everyone was focused on helping Gary, Ray activated his dragon eyes. He was afraid that Gary might have been infected by the shadow plague, but there didn't seem to be anything wrong with his aura. When morning came, everyone seemed sluggish, everyone except for Gary. Stretching and yawning, he said, "Oh, I haven't slept like that in ages." That was so good. Then he noticed the expressions of those around him. They were all frowning at him. "Huh? Did I do something?" Monk glanced at Ray and mouthed the words, "You need to talk to him now." Monk was right. Although Gary felt fine now and had returned to his usual self, no one knew if his nightmares would stop. "Hey, Gary, do you mind if we talk?" Ray asked. Gary looked stunned. "Did you just ask me to talk to you? Ray, are you feeling okay?" "I think I'm the one who should be asking you that." While the others went down to breakfast, Ray and Gary walked outside the campus. Ray told him what had happened last night. Gary was surprised. He hadn't realized he had been talking in his sleep. He glanced around, waiting until a couple of passing students disappeared around a corner. "Ray, you know that big red door they showed us? The one that leads below the school? I know it's forbidden, but I think we should go down there and have a look. If they catch us, we'll be kicked out of Avrion. Are you sure about this? I've been having strange dreams about it, like something behind that door is calling to me. Why didn't you tell anyone about these dreams? What about the Master Knights? I don't need to tell the Knights everything. This is about me. But I'm afraid something might happen to me down there. I need your help." Gary's eyes were filled with sadness. It was as if he was begging Ray. "Even if I told the Knights, they would never let me go down there. That place is full of criminals." Ray hesitated. If they got caught, they would both be expelled. He still had a lot to learn at the academy. But something about Gary's words stuck with him. For one, his dragon eyes had been unable to see past the red door. He couldn't sense anything beyond or below the academy. Were the criminals so dangerous that they had to be hidden? Or was there an even bigger secret the academy was keeping? And perhaps Gary was the first person to sense it? "I'll think about it," Ray finally said. Gary's face brightened a bit. Those words seemed to give him hope. As the day went on, Ray attended his training at the martial arts hall. They were now focusing on fighting techniques while using ki to enhance their bodies. But when Ray gathered his ki, something strange happened. It was no longer difficult to control the size as before. He could easily gather twice as much as he once could. It flowed gently through his body, no longer causing him pain. He concluded that this must be the effect of the crystals and his evolution. It felt as if he had been given a completely new body. If he had to guess where his strength currently stood, it was likely on par with the old man's, just below that of the Master Knights. While training, Ray deliberately kept his ki level the same as before. He wanted to keep this a secret. If the Knights found out, they would surely suspect that he was the prophecy child. He wanted to test his strength, and he knew the perfect opponent, Harry. The last time they fought, Harry had completely humiliated him. Unfortunately, third-year students were often sent on missions, so the only chance to face him would be at the yearly school tournament. By the end of the day, Ray decided he would give Gary his answer tomorrow. There was simply too much risk for him at the moment. As he closed his eyes and fell asleep, a bright white light appeared in his vision. It was a dream. A glowing white orb floated in an endless black void. He slowly moved toward it, as if drawn to it. Then the orb whispered, "I will share my secrets." Suddenly, his body was flung backward. The white orb grew smaller in the distance. He reached out his hand to grab it, but then a massive red door slammed down, blocking his path. It was the same door from Avrion Academy. When Ray woke up, his mind felt clearer than it had in days. He now knew exactly what he needed to do. He had his answer. Even if it meant risking everything he had gained so far, he had to see what was behind that red door. The white orb in his dream had called out to him. Was this the same vision and feeling that had been haunting Gary? Was this why he was so desperate to go down there? The next day, Ray asked Gary to meet him alone. He told him that they would go together. Gary was overjoyed and couldn't stop thanking him, calling him the best friend he ever had. Ray felt a twinge of guilt. He hadn't told Gary about his own dream. This wasn't for Gary. It was for himself. But Gary saw things differently. Throughout training that day, Ray found it impossible to focus. All he could think about was the plan to infiltrate the red door. The anticipation gnawed at him. Every second of the day felt like an eternity. Gary, on the other hand, seemed more energized than ever, as if he had returned to his old self. The burden that had been weighing on him was now lifted. Once training had ended, Gary called both Ray and Monk to the temporary rooms of the Black Sash Mansion. Ray was surprised that Monk had been invited. Maybe Gary had asked for his help as well. When Ray entered the room, Gary swiftly closed all the windows and doors ensuring no one could overhear their conversation. A plan was spread out across the floor, carefully drawn and thought out. "So what's with the emergency meeting?" Monk asked, arms crossed. Gary walked over and placed a firm hand on Monk's shoulder. "Ray and I are going to see what's behind the red door, and we need your help." Monk's eyes widened. "You're going to do what? Are you insane? We'll be kicked out of the academy." Monk turned to Ray, as if expecting him to talk some sense into Gary. "You have to stop him, Ray." Ray shook his head. "You were the one who asked me to look out for Gary. He's been having dreams about the red door. This isn't just about curiosity." Monk scoffed. "Well, you two can go get yourself expelled, but I want no part of this." Monk moved towards the exit when Gary called after him. "Wait, you remember our duel? If Ray hadn't stopped you, I could have been seriously hurt. You said you owed me one. Well, I'm calling in that favor now." Monk's grip tightened on the door handle. His jaw clenched. He was wavering. "Monk, didn't you tell Ray that we were family?" Gary continued. "I see the black sashes as my family, and I need your help." Monk let out a frustrated sigh and released the handle, turning back towards them. "Fine, but after this, we're even. And I want to hear the plan first." Ray noticed that one person was missing. "Hey, Gary, if you wanted the whole black sash family in on this, why didn't you invite Kyle?" Gary rolled his eyes. "Come on, really? We all know he's got a big mouth." They all chuckled. It was true. If Kyle knew about this plan, half of Avery Academy would have heard about it by now. Gary laid out the plan. "Here's how we do it. Right now, 2 knights in black armor guard the red door at all times. They're said to be as strong as master knights, so there's no way we can take them on. But once a month, the black armored knights gather for a meeting, and they're temporarily replaced by squire masters. That's our chance. One of us will create a distraction. And while that's happening, Monk, we need you to pick the lock. You're the fastest and the best at it." Monk's cheeks turned slightly red, but he nodded. "What do we tell the others while we're gone?" Monk asked. "We say we're doing special training together," Gary answered. "What if they find out about the broken lock?" Ray questioned. "They won't. We've trained for missions like this our entire time here. This is exactly what black sashes are meant to do." Ray took a deep breath. "All right, let's do it." Suddenly, a startled gasp echoed from the window. Shadows flickered before forming into a distinct shape, a figure emerging from the darkness. It was Jasmine Hart. Her green eyes gleamed under the dim light, long black hair flowing past her shoulders. A black-gray cloak covered her body, and the unmistakable black sash adorned her chest. Jasmine was a third-year student, one of the best among the black sashes. They rarely interacted with third years, as most of them were out on missions. But given how few black sashes there were, everyone knew each other. She stared at them, wide-eyed. "I can't believe what I just heard." A heavy silence filled the room. Sweat trickled down Ray's back. He could hear the quickened breaths of both Gary and Monk. Gary narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing here? Were you spying on us?" "No, it was an accident. I came up here to train by myself. I was practicing blending in with the shadows." "Isn't that just a fancy way of saying you were spying?" Monk asked. "That's not the point." Jasmine snapped. "I heard everything. I know what you're planning, and you're not going to get away with it. Once I tell the Master Knights what you're up to, you'll all be expelled." The three of them exchanged nervous glances, each hoping someone had an idea on how to get out of this situation. Gary took a step forward, his voice calm but ominous. "Well, now that you know about our plan, we can't just let you go free, can we?" As Jasmine looked at Gary walking towards her, Ray could see the fear reflected in her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, her breathing uneven. Jasmine nervously smiled, tried to defuse the tension. "How about we just forget about everything that happened? You can pretend I was never here. No harm done, right?" Monk sighed with relief, but Gary wasn't finished. He continued walking toward her, his expression unwavering, his steps slow and deliberate. "Do you really think it's going to be that easy? All we did was talk about breaking the rules. We didn't actually do anything yet. I hardly think we'd be punished for this, but you try to threaten us." Jasmine's gaze darted toward the door, searching for an escape route. Monk and Ray had already anticipated this and stood firmly in place, blocking her path. Her eyes darted around the dimly lit room, searching for any advantage, any way out. Wait, look, I'm sorry. I promise I won't tell anyone, she pleaded, taking a cautious step back. The fact that she hadn't attempted to run meant she knew she was outmatched. Ray discreetly used his dragon eyes to check her aura. It wasn't particularly strong. However, she was exceptionally skilled in black sash techniques, enough to evade his detection earlier, which in itself was impressive. Gary's lips curled into a sly smile. Why don't you come with us? Jasmine frowned, her expression a mix of skepticism and apprehension. And break school rules? Aren't there criminals down there? That's what they say, Gary replied. But who knows what's actually down there? Maybe that's just a cover for something else. If we see any trouble, we turn back. Simple. Ray doubted she would accept. Even under pressure, she probably didn't believe they'd actually harm her. When should we go? She asked, stepping forward and examining the plans sketched on the floor, her voice steady now. Ray's brow furrowed. That was too easy. Honestly, ever since I came to this academy, I've been curious about the red door, Jasmine admitted. But we can't tell anyone about this, agreed? They all nodded in silent agreement. Okay, the plan starts tomorrow. We all have the day off because of the meeting, so it's perfect timing, Gary said, his excitement evident. Actually, I don't have tomorrow off. I have to be... Jasmine hesitated mid-sentence before continuing. Never mind. Don't worry, I'll make it. I've been training to blend with shadows, and I'm pretty good at it now. This is the perfect opportunity to test my skills. Gary extended his hand, palm facing downward. Come on, let's all agree to do this together. The rest of them placed their hands on top of his, and on the count of 3, they lifted them with a quiet cheer. As they parted ways, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that Jasmine had agreed too easily. Was she working for Sir Kay? Or perhaps another Master Knight? Maybe she would betray them when they reached the red door. Gary wasn't stupid. He had to be thinking the same thing. But when Ray glanced at him, he noticed that Gary was staring at Jasmine as she walked away, almost dazed. I don't trust her. Maybe it should just be us 3, Ray muttered. Don't worry. Trust me, Jasmine is good. Really good, Gary replied with a confident smile. I don't trust her at all, Monk snapped. You're clearly thinking with the wrong part of your body, Gary. Gary's face flushed red, and he went to kick Monk, but Monk dodged effortlessly, laughing as he did so. The next day, after training had ended, the 4 of them met outside the academy. A full moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow over them. The streets were quiet, the academy grounds empty apart from a few guards patrolling in the distance. They all wore their black sash gear, light armor for mobility, black hooded cloaks to conceal their identities, and soft leather boots to silence their steps. Each of them carried a concealed weapon in case things went wrong. Gary took the lead as they approached the area where the red door lay. He peered around the corner of the hall, then gestured for the others to follow. They moved quickly but cautiously, every movement calculated to remain unseen. They stuck to the shadows as much as possible, their shadow skills cloaking them in darkness. Jasmine was the most adept. Her movements were practically imperceptible. Every time she activated her skill, it was as if she had vanished completely. Ray kept a watchful eye on her. If she was a spy, this would be the perfect opportunity for her to alert someone. But she seemed just as focused and nervous as the rest of them. When they finally reached the red door, they all stopped in surprise. There was no one guarding it. The door was located beneath the academy, leading even deeper underground, a place meant to hold the most dangerous criminals, always under heavy guard. Yet now, it stood unguarded, its presence looming like a silent warning. Alarm bells rang in Ray's head. This had to be a trap, but even with his dragon eyes, he detected no one lurking nearby. The hallway was eerily still. It's time for you to do your thing, Monk, Gary said. Monk moved to the lock and pulled out a keychain of small tools, beginning his work with nimble fingers. His hands were steady, his focus absolute. You two watch the staircase in case anyone comes, Gary ordered, motioning to Jasmine and Ray. Ray was fine with this. It allowed him to keep Jasmine within sight. As he watched her, he noticed nothing unusual. She seemed just as nervous as the rest of them, her body tense as she listened for any sounds from above. After a minute or two, Monk succeeded. The lock clicked open, the sound far too loud in the silence. Gary wasted no time, pushing the door open and signaling for them to enter. One by one, they stepped through the doorway. Gary shut the door behind them, sealing them in. Darkness swallowed them whole. A damp, musty smell filled the air, thick and suffocating. Gary pulled out a circular object with a crystal embedded in its center. He tapped it, and an orange glow surrounded them, casting dim light just a few meters ahead. Shadows danced along the walls, making the underground space feel even more ominous. They turned their gazes forward. A stone stairway stretched downward into the abyss. The darkness was strange. Black Sash Knights were trained to fight in the darkness. In fact, darkness was their ally. Yet for some reason, not one of them could see anything beyond the orange glow emitted from Gary's light crystal. Ray's Dragon Eye skill was useless as well. Just like with the red door, something was blocking his abilities. It was just a jumbled mess if he tried to use it. But it was also what was pushing him to dive deeper into this place. "We should go back," Monk said shakily. "We've made it this far. We can't go back now," Gary insisted. "But we can't even see anything." Gary ignored Monk and started moving down the stairs. As the light's source drifted away, the rest of them were swallowed by the encroaching darkness. It felt as if they would be consumed by something if they didn't stay in the light. Each of them felt like it was hard just to breathe and were wondering why they were even going through with this. As the four of them moved forward, Gary led the way, Monk followed behind him, then Jasmine, while Ray took up the rear. He wanted to keep it this way in case Jasmine decided to make a break for it. He still had his doubts about her. While descending, Ray noticed that the stairs weren't a straight drop down, but spiral-shaped, curving downward with the wall always at their right side. They cautiously proceeded, wary of broken steps and the unknown depths below. At some points, they felt like they might have stepped on a few things, but were too scared to look down to see what it was. After 10 minutes, they finally reached the bottom, stepping into a circular chamber. They carefully moved around, scanning their surroundings, until they came across a massive iron door. After another quick search, it became evident there was nothing else. This door was the only way forward. "Well, I guess this is the only way," Gary said. "Why is there no one here?" Jasmine wondered aloud. "What do you mean?" Monk asked. "Don't you think there would be more guards stationed here? And what about the guards outside?" The thought unsettled all of them. Ray had assumed that Jasmine had lured them into a trap, which explained the lack of guards. But even she was questioning it now. Gary dismissed the thought and pushed the iron door open. With no choice but to follow their only light source, they hurried after him. As soon as Ray closed the door behind them, orange lights flared to life along the walls. The glow, similar to Gary's crystal, dimly illuminated the area. The room was enormous, at least as large as Avrian Academy's training grounds. It looked to be mostly empty, but what caught their attention were the remnants scattered throughout. Beds, makeshift cots, wooden tables, and discarded clothing. Half-eaten plates of food and rusted cutlery lay strewn across the ground. Yet, there was not a single soul in sight. "What do you think happened here?" Gary asked. "It looks like a campsite of some sort," Monk observed. "Maybe they were hiding down here," Jasmine speculated. "If they were hiding, what were they hiding from?" Ray thought to himself. Now that the room was dimly lit, Gary stowed his crystal. They split up to search the area for anything useful. Then Monk's voice cut through the silence. "Over here, there's another door." He shouted every so often to signal his location. Even with the lighting, it was still difficult to see too far ahead. So Monk would end up disappearing once in a while. Eventually, they all gathered in front of it. The iron door loomed over them, nearly 30 meters tall and 10 meters wide, an imposing, impenetrable barrier. "Did you try to open it?" Gary asked. "No, just in case there was something behind it," Monk admitted. The whole place gave him the creeps. Gary stepped forward and pushed against the door with all his strength. It didn't budge. He took a few steps back and slammed his shoulder into it. Bang! Still, no movement. "Well, are you guys just going to stand there? Or are you going to help?" Gary asked impatiently. "I thought you had it," Jasmine teased. Gary, Monk, and Jasmine worked together to push the door while Ray hung back, observing from a distance, searching for any signs they had missed. Even with their combined strength, the door remained unmoving. Frustrated, Gary coated his sword in key and slashed at the metal. He swung with full force, not holding back, not worried for if the door was detoyed. Not even a scratch. What is this thing made out of? Gary muttered. Jasmine stepped forward, eyeing the large circular indentation in the center. It must be locked. Either that, or it weighs a ton. Even if the door was heavy, their key should have at least budged it. And with Gary's sword key, a normal iron door would have been sliced clean through. Monk shuddered. I really think we should go. Whoever built this door didn't want people getting inside, or they were keeping something in. We can't go. Gary shouted. I can feel it. We're so close. Something inside is calling to me. But we can't go any further without getting this door open first, Jasmine pointed out. Gary wasn't the only one reluctant to leave. Ray, too, felt compelled to see what lay beyond. Ever since stepping underground, everything had been an enigma. And why did his dragon eyes fail beyond the red door? He had tried activating them multiple times, but they refused to work. In the absence of his ability, he had to rely on his ordinary sight. While the others argued about whether to stay longer or turn back, Ray stepped toward the door, running his hand along the center where the circular marking was. As the system message popped up, Ray couldn't help but think that he was onto something. There were two possible reasons why the system had triggered this response. Either the system had some kind of consciousness of its own, recognizing opportunities to assist him, or this entire situation was somehow linked to the system itself. Was this door part of the answers he had been seeking? Where had the system come from? Why had he transformed into a human? Whatever the case, there was only one path forward. As soon as Ray made his selection, a deep, mechanical grinding noise echoed through the chamber. The massive iron doors began to shift, gears clanking as they pulled apart, revealing the unknown darkness beyond. How did it? Jasmine whispered, awestruck as she watched the doors open. Gary, however, grinned widely and pumped his fist into the air. I knew you were special, Ray. Jasmine turned to him, still in disbelief. What did you do? Ray hesitated for a moment before replying. I don't know. I just touched it, and it started opening. As the last of the doors groaned to a stop, a yawning abyss of pure blackness greeted them. Once again, Gary took the lead, holding the light crystal high. The group cautiously stepped forward into what appeared to be a massive cavern. The glow from the crystal barely reached its surroundings. Its ceiling and walls were completely obscured by darkness. They walked in a straight line for about 15 minutes before Monk finally voiced what had been gnawing at all of them. I think we should turn back. Something feels wrong down here. Stop being a crybaby. We have to be close to finding something, Gary scolded. No, don't you feel it? Monk insisted. The deeper we go, the darker it feels. Jasmine nodded, her voice laced with unease. I agree. I think we've come far enough. We can always come back with more light crystals next time. It'll make exploring easier. Gary let out a frustrated sigh. Look, you two can go back if you want, but I'm moving forward. Whatever's down here has been calling to me. As Gary continued ahead, the shifting shadows seemed to coil around Monk and Jasmine, as if urging them forward. Reluctantly, they followed him. Without the light crystal, they would be swallowed whole by the darkness. Then, a sharp cracking sound pierced the silence. One of them had stepped on something. Everyone froze, their eyes darting downward. Under Monk's boot was a large, white object. He leaped back instantly, heart pounding. Is that a skull? Monk stammered, shaking. The object was massive, easily 3 times the size of a human skull. Age had left it brittle, cracks running across its surface like a web of fractures. I don't think it's human, Jasmine muttered, examining it. It's too large. It must belong to a magical beast. Monk swallowed hard, which means there are magical beasts down here. And if they were down here, they weren't basic tier ones. Oh, will you guys relax? Gary waved dismissively. That thing looks ancient. Whatever was here is long gone. The only corpses we saw outside were probably from that exploration team. The knights have likely already cleared the whole area. Ray remained silent. While Gary's reasoning made sense, the iron door nagged at him. If someone hadn't had access to the system like he did, how would they have gotten inside? Had the door always existed, or had it been built later to keep something in or out? Their journey continued until they arrived at an open, circular chamber. Numerous large openings tunneled into the rock like an enormous ant nest. Some of the tunnels were blocked by thick iron bars that had been violently torn apart as if something had forced its way out. "Do you see those bars?" Monk asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That means something escaped." Jasmine wiped sweat from her brow. "This is too much. We don't even know how deep we've gone. We should head back." "Then just go," Gary snapped, his frustration boiling over. Jasmine turned on him. "Gary, don't you see? The bars are broken. That could mean criminals escaped, or something even worse." Gary clenched his fists. "You think I don't know that? I might never get another chance to explore this place. We're risking everything just by being here. If the knights find out, we'll all be expelled from Avrion." "You're insane. Give me the light stone. I'm leaving." Jasmine held out her hand. "Ray, help us." Monk pleaded, desperation in his voice. Ray remained quiet. He didn't understand why Gary was so determined to push forward. He had already seen enough. It made sense to return later, when he was stronger. If they encountered something beyond their ability, it would be their end. He took a step toward Gary. Jasmine and Monk did the same. Gary noticed their movement and tightened his grip on the light crystal. "Ray, you two? You don't understand. We just need to go a little further." He backed away, stepping toward one of the tunnels. The crystal's light illuminated the darkness within. All of them froze. Their weapons were drawn in an instant. Gary saw their expressions shift and, confused, raised his sword toward them. "I didn't think you guys would go this far." Then came the sound, a deep, guttural snort behind him. Gary turned, the light crystal now revealing the monstrous figure standing just a few feet away. A towering beast, nearly 10 feet tall, with razor-sharp white teeth and two massive, curved horns protruding from its skull. Hoofed legs supported a muscular humanoid body, its massive arms tensed with sheer power. A minotaur, a king-tier creature. Ray's grip on his weapon tightened. The moment they had dreaded had finally arrived. Monster tier list, lowest to highest seen so far. Basic tier, wolf, fang boar, sharp worm, etc. Intermediate tier, black wolf, giant fang boar, etc. Advanced tier, drop bear king. King tier, minotaur. While they had seen a super tier crystal, no creatures of that rank had been encountered yet. Note, the shadow plague can promote infected creatures by 1 or 2 ranks. For example, the drop bear king was originally advanced tier, but the infection raised its strength to king tier. Gary quickly turned around, but before he could fully react, the Minotaur's massive fist was already hurtling toward him. Instinctively, he lifted his sword to block the attack, but it was futile. The sheer force sent him flying across the chamber, disappearing into the darkness. As he was flung through the air, he managed to throw his light crystal toward the center of the battlefield. The situation had turned dire. With Gary outside of the light's reach, it was impossible to tell how injured he was. Worse yet, without his presence, their already slim chances of survival had dropped even further. The Minotaur was a king-tier beast, far beyond what they could handle. Even with all 4 of them together, victory was nearly impossible. And with the dim lighting, Ray's Dragon Eye skill was useless. The Minotaur suddenly locked onto them. Without hesitation, it charged. Ray and Monk barely managed to react in time, activating their Shadow Step skill to vanish into the darkness. But when they turned back, their hearts sank. Jasmine hadn't moved. She stood frozen in fear, sweat trickling down her forehead, paralyzed. "Jasmine, move!" Monk shouted. Jasmine snapped out of her daze just in time to see the Minotaur's massive hand descending toward her. She tried to move, but it was too late. The beast grabbed her tightly, its fingers crushing her body like a vice. The sound of her bones creaking echoed throughout the chamber, and her screams of agony rang in their ears. Then, In a blur, a small figure leaped onto the Minotaur's hand, twin daggers flashing. Monk! He drove both blades deep into the back of the Minotaur's massive hand. The creature let out a guttural roar, releasing Jasmine from its grip. She fell limply to the floor, gasping for air. Ray's eyes widened. The person who had been the most terrified out of all of them had been the first to act. The Minotaur's fury now shifted entirely onto Monk. It swung at him wildly, but Monk's agility kept him just out of reach. He ducked, weaved, and flipped between its attacks, narrowly avoiding each devastating blow. Jasmine remained on the ground, barely conscious. She was too injured to move. Meanwhile, the Minotaur seemed to grow more enraged by the second. Then, suddenly, it stopped swinging at Monk. Between its two horns, tiny bolts of electricity began to spark and crackle, growing larger with each passing second. Just then, a figure emerged from the darkness. Gary. His left arm hung limply at his side, twisted in a way that was completely unnatural. It was clearly broken. "Monk, get out of there! It's an elemental attack!" Gary shouted. Monk immediately sprinted toward Ray and Gary. For some reason, the beast remained stationary while charging its power. But as the three of them watched in horror, realization struck them all at once. Jasmine was still lying helplessly on the ground, only a few feet away from the Minotaur. There was no way she would survive the attack. Jasmine must have realized it too. She clawed at the ground, desperately trying to drag herself away. Gary, panic evident on his face, tried to rush to her side, but Monk blocked his path. "We have to save her!" Gary yelled. "It's too late. Do you want to die too?" Monk shouted back. Gary clenched his jaw, fists trembling. He knew Monk was right, but the helplessness burned deep inside him. He cursed himself for how powerless he felt. The Minotaur's electricity now surged throughout its entire body. Then, spotting Jasmine still trying to crawl away, it took a single step forward and raised both of its fists. With a deafening crack, the Minotaur slammed its fists into the ground. The chamber trembled as a shock wave tore through the ground, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. When the dust finally settled, the Minotaur stood in a massive crater nearly 4 meters wide. "Where's Jasmine?" Gary shouted, his voice shaking. She must have been smothered to dust," Monk whispered, his voice wavering as he fought back tears. "No, she's fine." Ray's voice was calm but firm. Gary and Monk turned toward him, confusion evident on their faces. Then they saw it, a massive black-furred wolf standing beside Ray. It was the size of a fully grown tiger, a single large horn protruding from its forehead. But what shocked them even more was the unconscious figure resting on its back. "Ow, why is this magical beast helping us?" Monk asked, his voice filled with disbelief. While the Minotaur had been gathering its electric power, Ray had summoned Noir. There was no time to hide secrets anymore. If they wanted to survive, they needed to fight at full strength. "No time to explain. Just know that it's on our side. Noir, take Jasmine somewhere safe." Noir sprinted off into the shadows, gently laying Jasmine down at a safe distance before swiftly returning. Meanwhile, the Minotaur's body still crackled with energy. It was still incredibly dangerous. Ray took a deep breath. "I'm going to grab it. You two need to hide. When the time is right, hit it with everything you've got." Gary hesitated. "Did you see what it did to the ground? You won't be able to handle it. Just trust me." Gary and Monk exchanged a look before vanishing into the shadows. Noir, too, disappeared into the darkness. Now, the Minotaur's attention was solely on Ray, just as he wanted. Ray focused, gathering ki within his body, more than he had ever drawn before. But even this wasn't enough. "Would you like to use your mana?" Ray hesitated. The last time he used mana, it had nearly killed him. But he was stronger now. He had no other choice. Yes. A surge of power coursed through his body. His ki expanded dramatically, and he activated as many ki-enhancing cells in his hands as he could. His body hardened in preparation for what was to come. The Minotaur roared, lowering its head and charging at full speed. Its lightning-infused body moved faster than ever before. Ray planted his feet firmly. At the last possible second, Just as the beast's horns were inches from impaling him, he grabbed hold of both of them. The sheer momentum of the Minotaur pushed him back instantly. He gritted his teeth as his feet scraped against the stone floor, his arms screaming in pain. Lightning coursed through his body, each pulse threatening to make him lose his grip. But he couldn't let go. No matter what, he had to hold on. The Minotaur continued its charge, shoving Ray back further and further until... Crash! Ray's body slammed into the chamber wall, the impact nearly knocking him unconscious. The Minotaur came to a halt, still trying to push forward. Ray gritted his teeth, ignoring the unbearable pain. Now, everyone attack! Ray held onto the Minotaur's horns as tightly as he could. Blood trickled down the side of his mouth, his body convulsing with electric shocks that pulsed like a heartbeat. Each jolt sent waves of agony through him, but he knew that the moment he let go, those massive horns would pierce straight through his body. He had to endure it. The Minotaur dug its arms and legs into the ground, using its full strength to pin Ray further against the wall. Its short arms prevented it from reaching him, but it didn't need to. The sheer force alone was enough to crush him. Just then, Gary, Monk, and Noir appeared from behind. Without hesitation, they leaped onto the Minotaur's back, climbing towards its neck. Gary, his sword burning with ki, drove it downward with all his strength, aiming for the beast's thick neck. The blade shattered on impact. Monk followed, his twin daggers flashing as he accelerated, using his ki-enhanced legs to build momentum. He struck at the Minotaur's nape, but his blades bounced off uselessly, not even leaving a scratch. Noir was the last to attack. The massive black wolf lunged, sinking her fangs into the Minotaur's flesh. Yet the beast barely reacted. Then, with a violent pulse of electricity, its body flared with energy, shocking both Noir and Ray. Noir yelped and leapt back, retreating from the pain. "We have to run," Gary shouted. "We can't even hurt the thing," Monk added, disbelief written all over his face. Ray was surprised they hadn't bolted the second their plan failed. What made them stay? They had no chance of survival. If they left now, he wouldn't even blame them. "The second I let go, it'll kill me. You two need to leave. Let Noir take you out of here," Ray shouted. "No, we're all getting out of here alive," Gary insisted, determination blazing in his eyes. "This is my fault to begin with. I was the one who brought us here." Ignoring their injuries, Gary and Monk gathered their ki and slammed their bodies against the Minotaur, trying to knock it off balance. It was like trying to move a mountain. The beast didn't budge. Another surge of electricity exploded from its body, sending Gary and Monk flying through the air. Undeterred, they got back up and tried again. Watching them struggle, an odd emotion welled up inside Ray. They didn't deserve to die here. There were plenty of humans who did, but not them. "Would you like to use the skill mana drain?" "Yes," Ray roared. Suddenly, notification screens flooded his vision. Mana pool +1, mana pool +1, mana pool +1. "Would you like to use mana?" "Yes," he repeated, desperation fueling his voice. Mana surged through his body, supplementing his ki, expanding it. He transferred the newfound power into his hands, his grip tightening. As his strength grew, the Minotaur's electrical pulses began to weaken. He was winning the struggle. "Hey, are you seeing this?" Gary asked, eyes wide. "Yeah, it looks like the Minotaur's getting weaker," Monk replied, equally shocked. The Minotaur's physical strength hadn't diminished, but Ray's use of mana drain had stripped away its elemental power. He was using its own mana against it. Just when it seemed like Ray was gaining the upper hand, the Minotaur reared its head back and bucked wildly, sending Ray flying. Before he hit the ground, Noir leapt, catching him midair and bringing him back to the others. But now there was a major problem. Ray could no longer move. His body was paralyzed from the repeated electrical jolts. The only thing keeping him standing before had been the mana he was draining. Now, with that link severed, every nerve in his body screamed in agony. A deep, guttural snort drew their attention. The Minotaur had regained some of its electrical power. Sparks flickered across its skin. "We have to leave," Gary said. "Let's take one of the tunnels." With Noir carrying Ray on her back, They sprinted toward one of the chamber's many exits. But before they could even make it halfway, the Minotaur moved, its speed vastly enhanced. It intercepted them with terrifying ease. Then, lowering itself on all fours, it charged. They barely had time to react. They squeezed their eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable end. Clash! The ground shook as though two giants had collided. The force nearly knocked them over. Ray's eyes fluttered open, expecting to see another beast competing for a meal. But what he saw was something else entirely. A human figure stood between them and the Minotaur, a black scimitar gripped in his hand. His armor, a dark leather set, was unmistakably crafted from beast materials. His boots made from thick fur. His chest plate, fashioned from the hide of a powerful creature. Sir Kay, Monk gasped. Sir Kay had moved at an inhuman speed, positioning himself directly between them and the Minotaur. With a single motion, he parried the Minotaur's charge with his scimitar, halting its momentum. Then, in one fluid strike, he sliced downward, severing one of the Minotaur's horns. The beast let out an enraged bellow, swiping at Sir Kay with its massive hand. It caught his leg, yanking him from the ground and slamming him into the stone floor. Blood sprayed from Sir Kay's mouth. But even as he was pinned, Sir Kay remained composed. With a calculated strike, he severed one of the Minotaur's fingers, forcing it to release him. He rolled away, landing on his feet. The Minotaur roared again, its body crackling with lightning. It lunged, aiming to finish Sir Kay in one final charge. Yet, just before impact, Sir Kay vanished. The Minotaur halted, confused. Its prey had disappeared. A heartbeat later, Sir Kay reappeared, already on the Minotaur's back. Before the beast could react, he drove his blade downward. The black scimitar sliced through flesh and bone, cleaving the Minotaur's head clean off. The beast's head rolled to the floor, its massive body collapsing soon after. Sir Kay barely acknowledged the fallen creature. Without hesitation, he turned toward Ray and the others. His gaze on Ray couldn't believe his eyes. The beast they had all struggled against had finally been defeated. The black scimitar Sir Kay wielded had to be a high-tier beast crystal weapon to have sliced through the Minotaur's thick hide. Even with the use of ki, their own weapons had been utterly ineffective. As the beast's body collapsed, another notification appeared in Ray's vision. Task 3/1000 complete. Mana Eater was a skill similar to Mana Drain, but with a distinct difference. While Mana Drain absorbed the mana of beasts and people, Mana Eater consumed their elemental attributes. The Minotaur, for instance, had possessed a lightning elemental affinity. If Ray touched the corpse, he could potentially strengthen his own lightning-based abilities. At the moment, however, it seemed like a useless skill. Ray didn't have any abilities that required elemental attributes. Still, he had a few theories on how he could use it in the future. There wasn't time to dwell on that now. The real problem at hand was Sir Kay. He was approaching, and none of them knew how he would react. The Academy's rules were clear. No student was allowed to enter the Red Door without explicit permission. The punishment was immediate expulsion. Sir Kay strode toward them, his chest piece smeared with streaks of blood from the fight. As soon as you arrived, the horned wolf ran away, sir, Ray said quickly. While Sir Kay had been fighting the Minotaur, Ray had unsummoned War. He could perhaps come up with an excuse for Gary and Monk, but if a Master Knight discovered Noir, it would cause far greater problems. Sir Kay didn't acknowledge the statement. Instead, he handed each of them a light crystal before stepping toward Jasmine. Without hesitation, he slung her unconscious form over his shoulder and simply commanded, "Follow me." He turned and started heading back in the direction they had come from. He said nothing, but the weight of the silence only made Monk more nervous. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Are we going to be expelled from the academy? Sir Kay stopped walking and turned to face them. His gaze scanned each of them, scrutinizing their injuries, their exhaustion, their very presence. You should all consider yourselves lucky to be alive, he said finally. Never mind expulsion. If that beast had retained more of its magical power, even I would have struggled greatly. Monk still looked apprehensive. So what does that mean? Sir Kay sighed. In any normal circumstance, yes, you would be expelled on spot. But the truth is, we need knights like you. To have survived against a king-class beast is no small feat. It would be a waste to cast out students with such potential. We will keep this matter between us. A wave of relief washed over them, but Gary still had one lingering question. How did you even know we were down here? Ray had been wondering the same thing. His initial suspicion had been Jasmine, but looking at her now, injured and barely conscious, it was hard to imagine she had sent for help. Sir Kay's expression remained unreadable. The lurker informed me. Who's the lurker? Gary asked immediately. You students have learned enough secrets for one day. Once we pass through the red doors, not a word to anyone. Even with my position, there is only so much I can do. They continued walking in silence until they reached the giant iron doors. Sir Kay stopped again. Which one of you opened this door? Before the others could react, Ray spoke up first. It was open when we got here. Monk and Gary exchanged glances, but understood Ray's intention. They nodded in agreement. Sir Kay studied them for a moment, then simply turned away. Wait on the other side. They obeyed, stepping through the doorway. They couldn't see what he was doing, but the giant iron doors began to shift and close. Sir Kay darted through just before they locked into place, resetting back to how they had first found them. As they turned to leave, Ray suddenly heard a soft, gentle voice. Come back when you are stronger. He stopped, glancing at the others. No one else seemed to react. They hadn't heard it. He resumed walking without a word. The voice was familiar. It was the same one from his dream. After climbing the spiral stairway, they finally reached the red door. Just like before, there were no guards. Sir Kay secured the entrance with a new lock, making it appear untouched. Then, handing Jasmine over to them, he instructed, take her to the hospital. I also suggest the rest of you get checked as well. Before he could leave, Gary hesitated, then blurted out, do you think we could maybe have a Minotaur's beast crystal? Sir Kay had extracted the crystal the moment he had slain the beast. Ray had secretly hoped the system would have claimed it, but luck wasn't on his side this time. Sir Kay scoffed. This is my prize. I didn't get injured just for you little twerps. Without another word, shadows enveloped his body, and he vanished from sight. They followed Sir Kay's instructions and took Jasmine straight to the hospital. She remained unconscious, and the doctors informed them that she would need several days to recover. Gary, having suffered a fractured arm, was fitted with a cast. Monk, despite being in better shape, had sustained minor burns and bruises. Ray, however, had a strange experience. Initially, the doctors insisted he remain in the hospital for a few days. Though he had no severe external wounds, they detected multiple internal injuries that required monitoring. But after only a few hours, follow-up tests baffled the medical staff. His internal injuries had vanished. The doctors chalked it up to faulty medical equipment during their initial assessment. After another day of observation, Ray was free to go. The mysteries surrounding his body, his abilities, and now the new voice in his head only continued to grow. But for now, his focus was set on one thing, getting stronger. Monk and Gary decided to stay with Ray in the hospital for a couple of days. Although the doctors confirmed that he was fine, they insisted on additional checkups just to be sure. Ray appreciated the concern, though he found the extended stay somewhat tedious. After a few days, Jasmine finally woke up. The moment they heard the news, they decided to check up on her. Gary was especially insistent, burdened with guilt over the entire ordeal. He had apologized to Monk and Ray countless times, but still he wanted to see Jasmine himself to make sure she was all right. When they entered her room, Jasmine was fully awake, though she still couldn't move well. Unlike Ray, she wasn't covered in bandages, but the doctor informed them that she had suffered several broken ribs, which would take time to heal before she could be discharged. How are you holding up? Monk asked, eyeing her bandages with concern. Jasmine gave them a small smile, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I'm okay, but I don't really remember much of what happened. For a moment, I thought I was dead. Ray, Gary, and Monk exchanged glances before recounting everything, except for Noir. They told her that Sir Kay had arrived just in time to save them and that, thankfully, they wouldn't be expelled from the academy. Ray had also asked Monk and Gary to keep Noir's secret, telling them that he had learned to use magic and could summon a pet. Since summoning and taming beasts were linked to mages, it was a plausible enough explanation. He also explained that if Avrian ever found out about his abilities, they might force him to transfer to Roland Academy. That was enough to satisfy their curiosity, and they stopped asking about it. After hearing the story, Jasmine furrowed her brows, deep in thought. "How did Sir Kay know we were there?" she asked after a moment. Gary paused before replying. He said something about the lurker informing him. "Do you know who that is?" Jasmine's expression darkened slightly. She hesitated before answering. "The lurker is a myth among the students at the academy. Supposedly, he's someone who hides in the shadows, protecting students from danger or reporting those who break the rules." Ray wasn't convinced. He had never seen any sign of this so-called lurker whenever he used his dragon eyes. The only person capable of hiding from his detection was Sir Kay himself. Perhaps Sir Kay had simply used the myth as a convenient cover to conceal the real informant. Once they confirmed Jasmine was recovering well, they decided to leave her to rest and headed back to their dorms. They had been gone for several days, and their roommates were surely wondering what had happened. As expected, the moment they returned, everyone bombarded them with questions. They explained that they had been involved in an accident during their special black sash training, which accounted for their absence and Gary's cast. Kyle, however, wasn't convinced. As a fellow black sash trainee, he knew they weren't telling the whole truth and kept pestering them about it. In the end, it took Sir Kay reaffirming their story before Kyle finally dropped the matter. Nights became more peaceful as Gary's nightmares subsided. Ray, too, stopped dreaming about the Red Door. Even so, he resolved to return there one day, once he was strong enough. Lying in bed for 3 days had given Ray ample time to reflect on their last battle. Noir had proven to be a formidable ally, her speed making her an invaluable asset. If he could enhance her further with beast crystals, her power would grow exponentially. His next goal was clear. He needed to obtain more intermediate-tier crystals as quickly as possible. The other thing weighing on his mind was beast crystal weapons. After witnessing how effective Sir Kay's weapon was against the Minotaur and how ineffective their standard weapons had been, Ray realized he needed a beast crystal weapon of his own. The issue, however, was twofold. He needed both money and a specific type of beast crystal that could be forged into a weapon. Ray was back in a martial arts hall, training under the old man. Though his mentor hadn't questioned his absence, it was clear he was relieved to see Ray unharmed. They resumed their regular sessions, focusing on refining his combat techniques. They practiced Ray's 3 fighting forms. The first form involved standard swordplay, concentrating on enhancing attack power through ki infusion to make his strikes as fast and powerful as possible. The second was his beast form, an unpredictable, feral style that allowed him to move swiftly on all fours, making his attacks harder to anticipate. The third and final form was his martial form. This form was a hybrid between the first two. Ray carried his blade in his mouth while utilizing his fists for martial arts techniques. It was an ideal balance, allowing him to block attacks and counterstrike efficiently. However, it had a major flaw. If his opponent's ki surpassed his own, his bare hands wouldn't be able to withstand their attacks, making him vulnerable to bladed strikes. At the moment, Ray wasn't too concerned about that. With the Minotaur's mana added to his own, he now had 10 mana points, an unusually high amount for a student his age. He sparred with the old man using his martial form, learning new close combat techniques. Each session pushed his limits further, but he welcomed the challenge. "Good, good," the old man said, nodding in approval. "You're progressing well. I think you'll soon be ready for the upcoming tournament." Ray blinked. "Tournament?" The old man raised an eyebrow. "Do you not remember? It's the tournament between all students to determine who will represent Avrian Academy in the All-Kingdom tournament." With everything that had happened recently, Ray had completely forgotten about it. The tournament was set to begin in a couple of months and would include both second-year and third-year students. The top 5 combatants would then move on to the All-Kingdom tournament, where they would compete against fighters from across the continent. The old man smirked. "As my student, I expect you to make it to the top 10 at the very least. Ray exhaled, already feeling the pressure. I think I need some new equipment first. The old man studied Ray's attire. He had no beast gear whatsoever, which put him at a clear disadvantage. Third-year students had spent an entire extra year hunting beasts, giving them ample opportunities to acquire powerful gear. After a moment of contemplation, the old man grinned. I think I have something you might like. The old man disappeared into the side room attached to the martial arts hall. Until now, Ray had assumed it was a restroom due to the noxious odor that constantly wafted from beneath the door. It turned out to be a storage room instead. For 10 minutes, Ray waited idly, listening to the occasional grunt, curse, and the unmistakable sound of something shattering, likely something of importance. Then, the old man burst through the door, holding up a pair of large gauntlets. Ah, here they are. The gauntlets were red, adorned with a turtle-like pattern. Their fingertips were pointed, black-tipped like small daggers. Finally, I knew I still had these lying around. You can borrow them for now. Heck, you can even keep them if you pay what they're worth, the old man said, handing them over. Ray took the gauntlets, immediately feeling their weight. The design alone suggested they were beast crystal items. Beast gear often retained characteristics of the creature it came from. Given their appearance, they likely originated from a turtle-like beast. As Ray studied the gauntlets, the old man impatiently tapped his foot, excitement glinting in his eyes. Well, are you just going to stare at them, or are you going to put them on? Ray slipped the gauntlets on. They were slightly too large, but before he could adjust them, the material tightened around his forearms and fingers, shrinking to fit snugly. It was as if they had been custom-made for him. It almost felt like magic. The gauntlets were now very snug on his hands, and he could move them through the air perfectly. The old man grinned. They look good on you, boy. Unfortunately, they're only intermediate-tier crystal items. If I let you borrow anything higher, it wouldn't be fair to the others. Ray nodded. Thank you. I promise to repay you for this in the future. Although the old man mentioned fairness, Ray didn't see anything wrong with it. The tournament would feature participants from all walks of life. Nobles would receive expensive equipment from their families. Was that considered unfair? Still, he understood the old man's caution. As an elder of the academy, he had to avoid favoritism. Eager to test the gauntlets, Ray sparred with the old man for a while, gradually getting a feel for them. It was a shame he couldn't use his full strength. Otherwise, they could have had a proper match. The gauntlets enhanced Ray's strength to the level of his ki-empowered hands. If he infused them with ki, they would become even stronger. The sharp fingertips allowed them to function as claw-like weapons, while their durability meant they could double as both a shield and a striking tool. The best part was that the gauntlets absorb a portion of the energy from his attacks, allowing him to focus his ki on other areas. Before, he had to choose between offense and defense. Now, he could do both simultaneously. Ray continued training with the gauntlets for the next hour, adjusting his fighting style to accommodate their weight and new capabilities. He tested different ways to enhance his strikes, seeing how they interacted with his ki flow. The sharp fingertips proved especially useful for rapid, precise attacks, while the reinforced plating allowed him to block strikes with minimal effort. All that was left was for Ray to save up enough money to get the blacksmith to craft a chest piece from the fang boar crystal. Soon, he would have a proper set of armor. After training ended, night fell over the academy. Ray climbed to his favorite spot, the roof. He wore his hooded cloak and tied the black sash around his neck. Tonight, he had a plan. Tomorrow was the academy's designated rest day. Students had 4 days of training, 1 rest day, then a hunting expedition on Saturday, followed by another rest day. But Ray wasn't interested in resting. He wanted to test the full potential of the gauntlets and obtain more intermediate-tier crystals. Weekend hunts were limited to basic-tier beasts, which were of little use to him now except for selling their crystal cores. He needed something more challenging, something that would give him more power, but what? After absorbing the Minotaur's mana, Ray had 10 points to allocate to his ki. If he focused them on his shadow skills, he could expand his concealment abilities, allowing him to cover not only himself, but another entity as well. Witnessing Noir's incredible speed had sparked an idea. If he cloaked both himself and Noir in shadows, they could move through the city unnoticed. It was the perfect plan as long as it worked. Ray had tested his theory by walking through the city a few times, and no one had seemed to notice. The Black Sash Knights were rare. Few knew how to detect their abilities, let alone counter them. He thought back to when he had first joined the Black Sash Knights. There was partly disappointment, but now he was quite thankful for everything that had happened. Summoning Noir, the massive black-horned wolf materialized by his side. Ray mounted her and activated his shadow skill. Dark tendrils of energy curled around them, merging with the night until they blended seamlessly into the surroundings. Noir bolted forward, leaping from rooftop to rooftop. Within moments, they reached the city wall. Without hesitation, Noir launched herself over it, landing gracefully on the other side. The sheer drop did nothing to slow her. Ray used his dragon eyes to scan the area behind them. His ability had grown significantly since his body evolved into that of a dragon knight, allowing him to see at even greater distances. As he observed the guard atop the wall, his suspicions were confirmed. No one had noticed a thing. The knights had merely felt an odd gust of wind, nothing worth investigating. The shadow skill wasn't flawless. It caused slight distortions in the surrounding area, which could be detected in broad daylight. But at night, combined with Noir's speed, they were practically invisible. With the city behind them and the wilderness ahead, it was time to hunt. There were currently 3 primary hunting grounds near Avrian City deemed safe enough for second-year students to explore: the forest, the foothills, and the swamp. While there were additional hunting locations, such as the caves adjacent to the city, they were far too dangerous. After the incident with the Red Door, Ray preferred to play it safe for a while. The forest was teeming with insects. Although they were weak individually, they traveled in swarms, making them a challenge. Ray had no attacks that could effectively handle multiple enemies at once, making a group of intermediate-tier beasts particularly difficult to face. The swamp housed a more diverse range of creatures, but its terrain would hinder Noir's speed. That left the foothills, a series of rolling hills leading to a mountain range. This area was rumored to host the strongest creatures among the 3. With his destination decided, Ray set off towards the foothills. Noir's speed was remarkable. What would take an hour on foot was covered in just 10 minutes with her swift movements. It was even a joy to see such a thing. Ray was increasingly satisfied with his decision to evolve Noir in this direction and eagerly anticipated her future growth. Could she continue to grow even further? As if sensing his thoughts, Noir let out a small bark. Ray had never needed to issue commands to Noir. She acted as if she could read his mind, responding to his intentions without hesitation. He felt a pang of guilt. Noir possessed a high level of intelligence, yet he rarely had the chance to summon her. In the future, when I don't need to hide things anymore, I promise I'll let you out more, Ray said softly. Noir barked again, her tail swishing, seemingly pleased with his words. Soon, the towering peak of the mountain came into view, piercing through the clouds. The summit was covered in white snow, while the lower hills were dotted with trees and caves where beasts likely dwelled. Upon reaching the first hill, Ray dismounted and chose to proceed on foot at a slow pace. There was no need for a light crystal, as it would only attract attention from the magical beasts. Noir's vision was well suited for the dark, and Ray had his dragon eyes. Activating the skill, he scanned the area, detecting several red life forces. One in particular stood out, far beyond the others in strength. It resided at the peak of the mountain, beyond the clouds. Its presence alone made Ray uneasy. It was the strongest creature he had sensed so far, perhaps even surpassing the Minotaur. Fortunately, students frequently hunted in the foothills, meaning this powerful beast likely remained at the summit, uninterested in humans. As long as Ray avoided its domain, he should be safe. The foothills were blanketed in snow, making movement difficult. Many of his Black Sash Knight techniques required precise footwork, meaning he would have to rely on brute strength instead. Ray headed toward a cave at the top of one of the hills. Along the way, he encountered several creatures known as Kikrin, dog-sized beasts with furless bodies, save for tufts of fur on their ears and snouts. Their grotesque appearance aside, they were agile, but their speed was no match for Noir, who swiftly dispatched them with a single bite. The system no longer notified Ray when he obtained basic tier crystals. Perhaps he had already maxed out his basic tier points. Nonetheless, he still carved the crystals from the creatures' bodies. He could always sell them later. Finally, he reached the summit of one of the hills. In the distance, a cave entrance loomed, with a white bear standing guard in front of it. The beast was slightly larger than Noir. Upon spotting them, the bear immediately charged forward. Noir, stand down. I want to test my strength. Ray watched the bear close the distance, its powerful limbs kicking up snow as it ran. 10 feet away, it reared up on its hind legs and lunged. If you hadn't attacked me first, I would have given you a painless death, since I'm the intruder here. Ray smashed his fists together, bracing for impact. As the bear came down, he grabbed both of its massive paws, halting its momentum mid-air. A flicker of realization passed through the bear's eyes. It had underestimated its prey. It tried to retreat, but Ray's gauntlets held firm, their black fingertips digging into its flesh. Releasing one paw, Ray cocked his free fist and drove it into the bear's stomach. The impact tore a hole straight through its torso. The bear collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Ray grinned. Intermediate tier beasts had once been a challenge, but now he had dispatched one without taking a single hit. His progress was undeniable, but he still had a long way to go to reach the level of warriors like Sir Kay or the Minotaur. Intermediate beast crystal obtained. 1. A system notification appeared, signaling his first intermediate tier crystal drop of the night. It seemed his luck was improving. Ray and Noir continued hunting across the foothills, encountering 2 more bears. He let Noir fight one on her own. The bear's attacks were slow, but Noir lacked the raw power to deal a fatal blow. After 10 minutes of back-and-forth combat, Ray finally stepped in to finish the beast. Noir looked disappointed, but Ray explained they didn't have the time to prolong the fight. It was an expected outcome. Noir, after all, was still an intermediate-tier beast, and she hadn't absorbed any additional crystals since evolving. At this moment, she was no stronger than any other magical beast of her tier. By the end of their hunt, they had gathered a total of 16 basic tier crystals and 3 intermediate tier crystals. 2 had been automatically collected by the system, while Ray manually carved out the 3rd. He let Noir absorb the first intermediate crystal, bringing her total points up to 8, while his own count rose to 6. With their mission complete, Ray turned back toward the academy, ensuring his roommates wouldn't grow. As they approached the towering city walls of Avrian, Ray unsummoned Noir. The walls were far too high for her to scale. Leaving the city had been easier, as they could leap from rooftop to rooftop, making the height difference negligible, but returning required a different approach. Even though it was late, Avrian remained bustling with merchants and cargo coming in and out at all hours. Ray needed only to wait for the right opportunity. As the gates opened to allow a caravan through, he slipped past the guards unnoticed, blending effortlessly into the shadows. Back at the academy, Ray returned to his dormitory, silently slipping into bed without making a sound. The next morning, his roommates quickly noticed his late return, though they were used to him disappearing without explanation. However, what surprised them were the 2 gauntlets he had brought back. "Where did you get those?" Gary asked, eyeing the weapons curiously. "The old man gave them to me. Since I'm his only student, he wants me to do well in the upcoming tournament." Gary muttered under his breath, "Maybe I joined the wrong club." Ray noticed a flicker of disappointment in Gary, Monk, and Ian's eyes. Unlike Slivia, Martha, and Dan, who came from affluent families and received support, they did not have the luxury of owning beast gear. "Maybe you guys will be able to get something in the next hunt," Ray said in an attempt to lift their spirits. That seemed to cheer them up. With the hunt scheduled for tomorrow, they would be heading back into the forest. If Ray used his dragon eyes, he could guide them to areas where intermediate-tier beasts roamed, increasing their chances of obtaining valuable crystals. For now, it was their designated rest day. while the others went off to play games and eat at a restaurant. Ray had other plans. He needed to visit the blacksmith. His goal was to have the fanged boar crystal crafted into a chess piece. He had more than enough crystals to cover the cost. The blacksmith area was located within the academy. As Ray entered the shop, he found the same scrawny man with glasses standing behind the counter. "Hi there. Would you be able to tell me what this can be used for?" Ray asked, handing over the volume One Bare Crystal. The blacksmith pulled out a circular lamp-like device and examined it closely. "Ah, the volume One Bare Crystal. This is an intermediate class," he remarked before glancing at Ray. "These bears are known for their tough defense. This would be ideal for forging into a shield." Ray frowned. A shield was useless to him. He preferred swords or his own fists. Trading it for work on the fanged boar crystal was an option, but it seemed wasteful. "Are you actually going to buy something, or are you just here to get me to do free work?" the blacksmith asked impatiently. Ray ignored his attitude and pulled out 10 basic tier crystals, placing them on the counter alongside the fanged boar crystal. "Would you be able to turn this into a chest piece? You said you could last time." The blacksmith counted the crystals before shaking his head. "You need another 10. Ray's brows furrowed. "You told me last time that a basic crystal is worth 100 and the cost of crafting is 1,000. The blacksmith scoffed. "Well, the price has changed. You can take it or leave it." Ray's frustration flared. The pricing structure for students was supposed to be fixed, ensuring the academy didn't profit from the work. Yet the blacksmith was now charging as much as an external shop. His blood boiled, and for a moment he had the urge to knock the man out and shove a crystal down his throat. "Can I ask why the price has changed? Or should I just report you?" Ray challenged. The blacksmith smirked. "Someone like you wouldn't be able to collect these crystals honestly. They're stolen. The extra charge is for my silence." Ray's muscles tensed. This was bad. If the blacksmith reported him to the Master Knights, they might interrogate him about how he had obtained the crystals. Even though they weren't stolen, how could he explain his abilities? "Fine." Ray reached into his pouch and pulled out another 10 basic tier crystals. The blacksmith hesitated, clearly surprised. His smug demeanor faltered. "Here," Ray said, tossing the fanged boar crystal onto the counter. "Just do a good job." The blacksmith hurriedly gathered the crystals before retreating into the forge. The sound of clashing metal and the heat from the room intensified as he began his work. As Ray waited, the shop's doorbell chimed. "Oh, hi, Ray. What are you doing here?" It was Slivia. She had come to search for new equipment in preparation for the upcoming hunt. After some small talk, Ray explained what had happened with the blacksmith. Her expression darkened with anger. How could he do that? We're all students at the academy. Before Ray could stop her, Slivia stormed behind the counter and into the forge. Heated yelling ensued between her and the blacksmith. When she finally emerged, she held 10 basic tier crystals in her hand. "Here, I got them back for you," she said with a triumphant smile. Ray took the crystals, grateful. "Thank you." Then a thought crossed his mind. He reached into his pouch and pulled out the volume One Bare Crystal. "Why don't you take this? I don't need it. Think of it as my way of saying thanks for getting my crystals back." Slivia's cheeks turned pink. "I can't take this. This is worth way more than just 10 crystals. Please, I really have no use for it." After a bit of back and forth, Slivia eventually gave in and accepted the crystal. Sometime later, the blacksmith finally returned with the finished chest piece. He presented a dark brown armor plated with black metal, with tufts of fur lining the gaps between the plates. Ray took the piece, feeling its durability. To his surprise, the blacksmith bowed his head. "I apologize for everything, sir. I didn't realize you were friends with the Hart family." Ray glanced at Slivia, who simply smiled back at him. With the armor now in his hands, he was ready for whatever challenges awaited tomorrow. It was the same routine as last time. All the students gathered at the city gate, where they were split into 3 separate groups, each assigned to a different hunting area. Every group would hunt in the same region for a month before rotating, and Ray's group was once again heading to the forest. When they all met up, Ray noticed that everyone's equipment had improved. Gary, Monk, Kyle, and Ian had upgraded to basic tier beast equipment, leaving behind their standard gear. Slivia, on the other hand, had opted to use her own intermediate shield instead of the Volume 1 bear crystal that Ray had given her. He didn't mind. He had given it to her as a thank you for helping him, and she was free to do as she pleased with it. As they walked toward the forest, Ray's roommates kept approaching him with gratitude. "Ray, I can't believe what you did." "Thank you," Monk said sincerely. "You're the best," Kyle added enthusiastically. Gary smirked, slapping Ray on the back. "I knew you had a caring side. When I can, I'll pay you back," Big Ian promised. Ray was completely baffled by their reactions. Looking over, he noticed Martha and Slivia giggling. He approached them, suspecting they knew what was going on. "Look at the big softy coming over," Martha teased before walking ahead, leaving Ray alone with Slivia. "So, I'm guessing this has something to do with you?" Ray asked. Slivia smiled. "Remember that Volume 1 crystal you gave me? I decided to sell it. I already had a good shield, so I didn't need another one. I used the money to help out the whole group." "Okay, but why are they thanking me?" "Because it was your crystal, duh. It was Martha's idea to tell them it was a gift from you and that you were too shy to say anything." Ray fell silent, processing the situation. He wasn't annoyed. Slivia was free to do whatever she wanted with the crystal, but the awkwardness of receiving gratitude for a deed he hadn't actually intended was unexpected. However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Perhaps he could use this favor to his advantage in the future. Slivia mistook his silence for anger. "You're not mad, are you?" Ray shook his head. "No, you're the leader, and you're looking out for your group. It was the right decision to make you the leader. I would have never thought to do something like that." Slivia's face turned red as she quickly hurried ahead of the group. Just then, Gary bumped into Ray with a knowing smirk. "Hey, tell me, there isn't something going on between you and Slivia, is there?" "What do you mean by going on?" Ray asked, confused. Gary sighed. "Forget it, man. You're denser than a plank of wood. Just don't forget about my sister, okay?" Gary's sister, Amy, had been the first person who hadn't treated Ray like a monster. She was currently studying at Roland Academy. Thinking about it now, Ray realized that Slivia reminded him a lot of Amy. He wondered how she was doing. After an hour of walking, they finally reached the entrance of the forest. Ray wished he could use Noir to scout ahead, but that wasn't an option in this scenario. The process was much smoother this time. Everyone already knew their groups, and there was no need for a long speech. Lancey simply announced the time they were expected to return, and they set off. However, just like last time, Lancey gave Ray a sinister stare as he passed by. The group entered the forest and immediately set to work, cutting down the bugs that attacked them. This time, it was much easier, and Gary was in peak condition. After collecting around 10 basic crystals each, the group was starting to get bored. "This is too easy, man," Gary shouted, effortlessly slashing a dragonfly out of the air. "Well, what do you guys want to do?" Slivia asked. Ray had activated his dragon eyes when they entered the forest, scouting out the area. He had spotted several locations where groups of intermediate-tier beasts were gathered. Initially, he had hesitated to engage them, unsure if they were strong enough. But after fighting the Volume 1 bear, he felt confident that they could handle it, especially as a team. He stepped forward. "If I can make a suggestion, last time I spotted a group of intermediate-tier beasts while scouting. I didn't say anything then because I wasn't sure if we were strong enough, but I can lead the way if you want." It might be risky," Slivia considered. "Oh, come on, Slivia. If there's any trouble, we could just run back. Plus, you have the whistle, remember?" Gary pointed out. "Okay, let's take a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand." Every hand in the group went up. "Well, I guess it's a yes then." With Ray assuming the role of leader and Martha covering the rear, they navigated through the dense forest, moving toward the red auras he had detected earlier. After about 15 minutes, they neared their destination. Ray raised his fist, signaling everyone to stop. Crouching behind thick foliage, they listened carefully to an ominous hum, large wings beating through the air. Peering through the undergrowth, they spotted a swarm of 10 giant Hercules beetles. Unlike the massive ladybugs they had encountered before, these beetles boasted 2 powerful pincers protruding from their mouths. Despite their enormous size, They maneuvered through the air with remarkable agility and speed. Dan hesitated. Are you sure these are only intermediate tier? Their auras confirmed it, though Ray understood why Dan was uncertain. The beetles certainly looked more formidable than what they had faced before. Slivia noticed Ray's lack of concern and quickly chided him. Don't underestimate your enemy, especially bugs. They might be smaller than other creatures, but they make up for it in strength, speed, or even poison. For safety, they decided to split into pairs, with each pair taking on 2 beetles. Ray and Gary, trusting their combined strength, volunteered to fight for instead. The pairs were assigned: Dan and Slivia, Martha and Monk, Ian and Kyle, with Ray and Gary tackling the biggest challenge. Still crouched, Slivia studied the beetles' movement patterns. She waited for an opening, watching the swarm shift. When she saw a gap in their formation, she shouted, "Now!" The Hercules beetles proved to be a formidable challenge for most of the party. Their hard outer shells and rapid bursts of movement made them unpredictable foes. However, their true strength lay in their forceps, which were capable of crushing an average human's bones in seconds. Their raw power alone made them dangerous, but their resilience meant that even if one could withstand their attacks, taking them down was a completely different ordeal. The most difficult part of this fight wasn't the beetles themselves. It was disguising Ray's true strength. He had to act as if he was struggling, keeping up the illusion for the rest of the group. In reality, these creatures were nowhere near his level. With the assimilation of basic and intermediate tier crystals, along with his siphon mana, his physical power had far surpassed that of the average fighter. Instead of eliminating them outright, he decided to turn this into a training exercise. He needed to refine his dexterity while using the gauntlets. With one hand, he blocked the beetles' powerful pincers. With the other, he slashed at their exoskeleton using the jagged black claws on his gauntlets. The crowd of onlookers watched in awe, completely oblivious to the fact that this was just practice for him. To them, it looked like a high-stakes battle, a struggle against the monstrous insects. After enough time had passed, Ray infused his gauntlets with ki and made quick work of the beetles, shattering their tough exoskeletons like brittle glass. Now that his opponents were dealt with, Ray turned his attention to Gary. He was faring well, though his fight was far from easy. 2 beetles took turns attacking him from both sides, their pincers striking in coordinated bursts. However, instead of evading, Gary took an entirely different approach. He parried one beetle's attack in such a way that it redirected into the second beetle. Their forceps clashed against each other, their strength inadvertently working against them. Despite this clever strategy, frustration was beginning to show on Gary's face. His ki-infused sword, though powerful, was not strong enough to pierce the beetle's reinforced armor. He needed something more. Patiently, he waited. Both beetles lined up their pincers for a simultaneous thrust. The moment they lunged, Gary sidestepped with impeccable timing. Using the momentum of his dodge, he swung his sword, guiding the beetles' attacks into each other. Their forceps impaled one another. Their own strength turned against them. Both creatures let out a final screech before collapsing, lifeless. Martha and Monk demonstrated excellent teamwork. Monk used his black sash footwork to weave through the beetles' attacks, effortlessly slipping between their lunges. His movements were so fluid that it appeared as if he were dancing. As he did this, he kept the beetles' attention locked on him, luring them into Martha's range. Martha, positioned at a distance, had recently upgraded her bow to an intermediate tier weapon. This allowed her arrows to finally penetrate the beetles' tough shells. However, while the arrows stuck into the beetles, they failed to deal immediate lethal damage. The creatures were sturdy both inside and out. Recognizing this, Monk capitalized on the openings created by the arrows. With each strike, he slammed his fists into the protruding shafts, driving them deeper into the beetles' bodies. The moment one beetle fell, he repeated the process on the next. It was a slow but effective strategy, and soon enough, their enemies were motionless. Ian, however, found himself in a dire situation. He was locked in a brutal struggle against his opponent, the beetle having caught him in its forceps. The monstrous insect was attempting to crush his ribs while simultaneously dragging him closer, its razor-sharp mandibles snapping hungrily. Ian, on the other hand, resisted with sheer brute strength, keeping the beetle at bay through nothing more than raw power and willpower alone. On the other side of the battlefield, Ka was proving to be all but useless. He managed to avoid sustaining any major injuries, but his attacks were doing nothing to damage his opponent. His sword was too weak, his swings too ineffective against the beetle's armored body. He was simply surviving, not fighting. Ian, after what seemed like an eternity, finally managed to overpower his opponent. With a final roar of exertion, he tore the beetle's forceps clean from its body. The creature let out a deafening screech before collapsing, motionless. Ian held the severed forceps in his hands, analyzing them for a brief moment before gripping them like twin axes. His expression shifted. He was going to make use of them. With renewed vigor, he turned his attention to Kyle's adversary. Wielding the forceps as makeshift weapons, Ian made quick work of the beetle, tearing through its defenses in a way Kyle had failed to do. Within seconds, the fight was over. Dan was doing surprisingly well. Unlike the others, he had abandoned traditional weapons altogether. Instead of using a spear, he opted for the massive stick they had all struggled to lift when they first met him. He swung it like a club, his brute force making up for his lack of cutting ability. Though his attacks didn't pierce the beetle's armor, the sheer impact of his blows left noticeable dents. Slowly but surely, cracks formed in the exoskeleton. Eventually, yellow liquid began oozing from within, and the beetle succumbed to its inevitable demise. Last up was Slivia. Her defense was flawless. Every attack sent her way was nullified by her shield. She moved with such precision that the beetle couldn't land a single clean hit. However, there was one major drawback. Her offense was lacking. No matter how many times she struck with her sword, the beetle's tough outer shell refused to give way. Her strikes, though graceful, simply weren't enough. The beetle seemed to recognize this. Realizing it couldn't break through her defense, and that she lacked the strength to harm it, it lost interest. Without hesitation, it turned and scuttled away, searching for an easier target. Martha, having already dealt with her own beetle, noticed Slivia's opponent fleeing. Without missing a beat, she knocked an arrow and let it fly. The arrow found its mark, pinning the beetle's forceps to a nearby tree. With its movement restricted, the rest of the group made quick work of it. As the group began to recover, a sudden creaking noise echoed through the forest. Before Ray could react, a massive tree came crashing down, separating him and Gary from the others. They instinctively stepped back, but before they could move, the fallen tree erupted into flames, forming a fiery barrier around them. Gary hadn't ordered the group to return to the academy for help merely because of a small forest fire. Instead, 3 figures stood before them, clad in high-level beast equipment. One wielded a sword, another spun a chain with a weighted tip, and the third carried dual daggers. They all had one thing in common. Their faces were concealed behind red masks with 2 slits for eyes. They were clearly the ones responsible for the fire, their intent unmistakable. They wanted to separate Ray and Gary from the rest of the group. Ray activated his dragon eyes, scanning the figures. "They don't show signs of the shadow plague," he muttered. "Do you think they're from a dark guild?" Gary asked. "Whoever they are, they're strong," Ray replied. Before they could discuss further, the swordsman lunged forward, leading the assault with a leaping overhead strike. Ray instinctively raised his left arm to block while preparing to counter with his right, but as the blade met his gauntlet, it sliced through with little resistance. Ray's eyes widened. He twisted his body at the last moment, avoiding the full force of the strike and using his shoulder to knock the swordsman off balance. Quickly, he put distance between them. His heart pounded. The fact that the enemy's blade had cut through his gauntlet meant only one thing. It was a higher-tier weapon. This was bad. The fact that his blade had managed to slice through Ray's gauntlets meant he wielded a higher-tier weapon. If all 3 of these enemies were as strong as this man, survival was nearly impossible. Ray quickly glanced over at Gary to see how he was holding up. Gary was engaged in a relentless battle with the dual swordsman. Sparks flew as their blades clashed repeatedly, each impact ringing through the air. Gary had no time to breathe, no moment to regroup. He was doing well to hold his ground, but minor scratches were beginning to accumulate. If this dragged on any longer, those small injuries would build up and ultimately cost him the fight. The fact that Gary could block his opponent's strikes at all meant that the dual swordsman wasn't as powerful as the first man who had attacked Ray. That confirmed it. Ray's own opponent was likely the leader of the group. Before Ray could form a new plan, the swordsman and the chain wielder charged toward him in unison. He immediately infused ki into his gauntlets, bracing himself for their combination attack. The chain wielder swung his weapon around his head a few times before hurling it toward Ray. He pivoted on his left foot to dodge, barely managing to grab the chain midair. Just as he prepared to yank it, the swordsman was already upon him. Ray quickly released the chain and rolled backward, barely avoiding a horizontal slash aimed at his torso. Deciding to eliminate the weaker of the two first, Ray dashed toward the chain wielder. But before he could reach him, the swordsman leaped in between them, cutting off his path. The chain wielder took full advantage of this to gain distance, resetting his stance and preparing for another range assault. No matter who Ray focused on, the other would interfere. He needed to rethink his strategy. Taking a few steps back, Ray prepared to reassess his approach. But before he could, the swordsman's blade began glowing a deep, fiery red. He swung his sword wildly in multiple directions, and with each slash, a blazing arc of fire shot out, racing toward Ray. He ducked and wove through the inferno, dodging the flames by mere inches. The heat from each fiery arc singed the air around him, making it harder to breathe. As the final blade of fire whizzed past him, a heavy, metal weight suddenly appeared, hidden within the flames. Ray had no time to react. The weighted chain slammed into his chest, launching him backward with immense force. His back hit the ground hard, and a sharp pain erupted in his ribs. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as he gasped for breath. Looking down, he saw that his chest piece was cracked. He was hurt, but there was no time to gauge the severity of his injuries. Just as he struggled to his feet, a scream rang out from his right. His eyes darted toward Gary, who was reeling from a deep gash across his left shoulder. Blood dripped down his arm, staining his clothes. "This arm just got fixed, damn you!" Gary shouted angrily at his opponent. Ray was shocked that Gary still had that much fight left in him. He was completely covered in wounds, barely holding himself together. If Ray didn't act soon, they were both going to die. The flaming swordsman was likely the one who had set the entire battlefield ablaze. He was the most dangerous of the group, and Ray knew he had to eliminate him first. The chain came at Ray again while he was still struggling to get up. With no time to dodge, he quickly rolled to the side and grabbed hold of the chain. The chain wielder immediately tried to pull it back, but it was useless. Ray poured every ounce of his remaining ki into his gauntlet and held on with all his strength. He wasn't letting go this time. The flamed swordsman rushed toward him, closing the distance with alarming speed. Ray pressed his free hand against the ground and shouted, "Summon War." In an instant, a black-furred, horned wolf materialized at his side. Without wasting a second, Ray leaped on Noir's back, still gripping the chain tightly. With Noir's incredible speed, they sprinted in circles around the two enemies, the chain winding around them as they moved. The chain wielder struggled to keep up, but before Ray could completely ensnare them, the flamed swordsman reacted swiftly. With a single swing, he sliced clean through the chain, breaking it apart. The metal links clattered to the ground. "The boy is a mage? No one told us about this," the chain wielder muttered to his ally. "It doesn't matter. The mission stays the same," the flamed swordsman replied coldly. Ray narrowed his eyes. "Noir, you handle the one on the left. The flamed swordsman is mine." Splitting their opponents was the best move. The flamed swordsman was clearly the strongest of the two, but with Noir keeping the chain wielder occupied, it was now a one-on-one fight. Just as Ray prepared to engage, his eyes flicked to Gary. He had thought Gary was already defeated, but his friend was somehow still standing. At first, Gary had been completely defensive, dodging, blocking, and taking small opportunities to counter. But something had changed. Gary's attacks were becoming unpredictable, forcing the dual swordsman into an increasingly uncomfortable position. His sword reached just the right spots at the right moments. The tables had turned. Gary was now the aggressor, and the dual swordsman was struggling to keep up. He wanted to counterattack, but Gary left no openings. It was as if he could read his opponent's mind, predicting each move before it happened. "Damn it," the swordsman yelled in frustration. "Aren't they just students? Why are they so strong?" Gary smirked. "You're right, we are students. But we're the best damn students at Avery Academy." Gary's next strike was aimed at the man's head. Seeing the power behind the attack, the man instinctively crossed both his blades to block. But the moment he did, Gary vanished from sight. The next thing the swordsman knew, his legs buckled from under him. He collapsed onto the ground in shock. Gary had feinted the attack and delivered a sweeping kick to his legs at the last second. Now, Gary stood over him, sword pointed directly at his throat. "Tell me," Gary demanded, "why did you attack us?" The man hesitated, but before he could speak, a blast of fire streaked across the battlefield. "Gary, watch out," Ray shouted. Gary barely managed to jump back in time, but the fire wasn't aimed at him. It engulfed the fallen swordsman, incinerating him within seconds. His body blackened as the flames consumed him entirely. Ray's eyes darted toward his own opponent. The flame swordsman had launched the attack mid-fight, sacrificing his own ally without a second thought. Gary staggered to his feet, breathing heavily. "Don't worry, Ray. I'll come help you now," he said, taking slow, unsteady steps forward. But as soon as the words left his mouth, his knees gave in, and he collapsed onto the ground. "Just stay there. You've lost too much blood," Ray called out. "Don't worry, I've got this." His voice was filled with confidence, but deep down, doubt gnawed at his mind. This opponent was stronger than anyone he had faced before, and now he had to fight him alone. Gary had done well in overcoming an opponent far stronger than him. Now, it was Ray's turn to do the same. The man Ray was facing wasn't as skilled with the sword as Gary's opponent had been. However, his equipment was on an entirely different level. His gear was incredibly high quality, reinforced to withstand devastating blows. Every time Ray managed to land a punch, it didn't seem to affect the man at all. It was as if he were striking an iron wall. If he couldn't harm his opponent, there was no way to defeat him. The man swung his sword at Ray with great force. He knocked it away with his gauntlet and struck forward, aiming for the man's chest again. He hoped that a second blow in the same area might make a difference, but the man didn't even flinch. Instead, he responded with an overhead swing. Ray crossed his arms to block the attack, the blade clashing against his gauntlets with a loud, metallic ring. The impact sent vibrations up Ray's arms, and he stumbled back slightly, glancing down at his gauntlets. There were now several noticeable dents. Sooner or later, they would break. He couldn't afford to drag this fight out much longer. With the chain-wielding man's weapon now shattered, he let the broken chains fall to the ground and pulled out a sickle from his belt. "You're just an intermediate beast. I've killed hundreds of your kind," the man said coldly. Noir cautiously circled him, keeping a close watch on his movements. Her biggest advantage in this fight was her speed, something she planned to use to its full extent. She suddenly pounced, her sharp horn aimed straight at the man's torso. The man reacted swiftly, blocking the attack with his weapon before swinging back at her. Noir leaped backward, avoiding the slash with ease. She repeated the attack several times, lunging forward before retreating in quick succession. However, the man blocked each time. He wasn't fast, but his reactions were sharp. He was reading her movements. She needed a new strategy. Determined, Noir began circling around him at full speed, hoping to confuse him. If she moved fast enough, she might find an opening before he could predict her next attack. The man suddenly reached down, grabbing part of the broken chain, still lying on the ground. With a sudden throw, he sent the chain flying toward Noir. It wrapped around her hind leg just as she tried to leap, sending her tumbling to the ground. A sharp yelp escaped her as she struggled to get back up. Blood trickled from her wounded leg, staining the dirt beneath her. Crap, I need to do something, Gary thought, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been watching the entire exchange while lying face first on the ground, meditating. He was trying to use his key, hoping to speed up his recovery. He had seen Slivia do it once, and though he barely understood how, he grasped the concept enough to attempt it. Gary's wounds had healed just enough for him to move again. The man stepped toward Noir, lifting his sickle into the air, ready to strike down at her. Gary, fueled by sheer will, pushed himself forward and launched his sword. The blade struck the sickle, knocking it out of the man's hand just in time. But the effort was too much. His wounds reopened, and he collapsed once more. "You idiot, it's just a beast. Why would you risk your life for it?" The man spat, irritation clear in his voice. As the man bent down to retrieve his sickle, Gary, gritting his teeth, threw his sword toward Noir. "Fight like your master," he thought. Noir, catching the movement, leaped into the air, grabbing the sword's hilt between her teeth. In a flash, she dashed forward. The man barely had time to react. Before he could fully stand, his head was already rolling to the ground. Noir had sliced through him in one swift, clean motion. None of Ray's attacks were working, but he still had one last thing he wanted to try. He had no idea if it would work, but at this point, he had no other choice. As the flaming swordsman saw another one of his men fall, he quickly shot out a blast of fire toward Ray's head and chest. The flames roared toward him, but instead of dodging, Ray seized the opportunity. If there was one weak point, it had to be the mask. Unlike the rest of the man's armor, it didn't seem like it was made of beast gear. Ray lunged forward, reaching out just as the flames neared him. His fingers wrapped around the mask, gripping it tightly. The fire scorched his skin, but he ignored the pain. The masked man recoiled, trying to move away, but Ray clenched his fist and crushed the mask in his grasp. The man was uninjured, but now his face was fully exposed. "No way," Gary gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. Even Ray was shocked. He never expected to see this person's face under the mask. It was someone who had repeatedly warned him about the dangers of the forest. Someone he had trusted. It was none other than Squire Master Lancey. "It doesn't matter that you've seen my face," Lancey said, his voice cold and unbothered. "Because all of you will die here today." Lancey was supposed to be one of the knights responsible for helping students if something went wrong. The others outside were likely searching for him, completely unaware that he was the one behind all this. If they left to seek help, they would have to return to the city. By then, it would be far too late. "You're a knight. How could you?" Gary's voice trembled with fury, his face red with anger. But he was too injured to do anything. "Shut up," Lancey snapped before shooting another wave of fire toward Gary. Gary barely had the strength to move. He closed his eyes as the flames rushed toward him. A sudden cry rang out. Noir had leaped in front of Gary, shielding him with her body. The fire consumed her fur, flames rapidly spreading over her. A painful howl echoed through the battlefield. "No!" Gary cried. "You bastard!" Ray acted quickly, summoning Noir back into the system. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he hoped it would extinguish the flames and give her a chance to heal. He stood still, his hands clenched into fists. Humans truly were trash. Whether Lancey had been targeting him or Gary, it didn't matter. What was the point of dragging others into this? Why cause so much unnecessary pain and suffering? Neither he nor Gary had done anything to deserve this. Lancey began charging toward Ray, his sword now completely engulfed in flames. "This is the end for you, Ray Talen. Once I'm done with you, I'll kill all your friends as well." The flames from the burning trees swirled around him, gathering toward his weapon. The fire that once consumed the forest had now completely coated his sword, increasing its intensity tenfold. Lancey lunged forward, bringing his flaming blade down in a devastating arc. The heat was unbearable. It burned the very air around them. But just before the blade struck, Ray's hands shot up, grabbing the sword between his palms. The moment his skin made contact with the weapon, the flames surged around him, searing his flesh. "Skill, Mana Eater, would you like to activate?" "Activate." Ray commanded without hesitation. Ray could tell that Lancey was putting all his power into the strike. Sweat was starting to run down Lancey's face as he struggled to move his sword, but this was Ray's only chance. Focusing all his ki into the palm of his hand, he grabbed the blade, determined not to let go. The problem was that this left his whole body vulnerable. With no ki protecting the rest of him, his face began to burn. It felt like it was melting off. His vision blurred, the overwhelming heat making it hard to focus. Fire attribute +1. Fire attribute +1. Fire attribute +1. The notifications kept sounding off in his head. Each one sent a pulse through his body, his ki forcefully absorbing the fire's power. As more notifications came, the fire started to weaken, its once intense heat dulling bit by bit. "What is going on?" Lancey shouted, trying to pull back the blade. His panic was evident, the realization creeping in that his strongest weapon was failing him. Desperate, Lancey began kicking Ray's body again and again. Each kick sent a shockwave of pain through Ray's ribs, his body convulsing. But he wasn't going to let go until he had absorbed all of the fire. "You dog, why won't you just die?" Lancey screamed, his strikes becoming more frantic. His voice was a mixture of rage and fear. He tried to yank the sword away, but Ray's grip remained firm. Finally, the notifications ceased. Ray released Lancey's sword, causing Lancey to stumble backward. His body was battered. His gauntlets were dented beyond recognition, and he could feel warm liquid pooling inside them, most likely his own shattered bones. His face was half burnt from the fire, and a few ribs had cracked from the relentless kicks. Everything hinged on this moment. There were two things he needed to confirm. First, whether Mana Eater would work on a beast crystal weapon. If it did, the elemental attribute would be stripped, rendering the weapon useless. Now that this was proven, he had to check one more thing. Clenching his fists together, he started to focus. The gauntlets began to glow a molten orange red, heating up until flames erupted, engulfing his entire arms. From his shoulders to the gauntlets, down to his fingertips, fire wrapped around him completely. The second test, whether he could infuse his ki with an elemental attribute. In theory, mana and ki were the same, just different methods of harnessing energy. Just as others used mana to create fire, now Ray possessed both fire ki and mana. If his assumption was correct, he could activate the cells in his gauntlets and create a fire weapon of his own. "You really are a demon. We were right to try to get rid of you." Lancey spat, his voice trembling. He tried to manipulate the flames around Ray's gauntlets, but his face dropped in horror. Mana Eater didn't suppress or borrow fire. It stole it, adding it to Ray's own body permanently. In a flash, Ray dashed toward Lancey, knocking the sword from his hands before grabbing him by the face and lifting him into the air. "No! No! No!" Lancey screamed. First, his face began to melt. Then his entire body was burned to a crisp. The power quickly faded from Ray's body, and he collapsed onto the ground, the weight of exhaustion crushing him. Gary slowly walked toward him, clearly injured himself. His movements were stiff, and he clutched his side, likely nursing broken ribs of his own. "Ray, your arms and face look terrible. We need to get you to a hospital," Gary said, his voice shaking, tears welling in his eyes. Ray wanted to respond, but his lips had partially melted together. Then suddenly, shadows began to form. He vaguely made out a human figure before the shape became clearer. Sir Kay had arrived. "Gary, where are the attackers?" he demanded urgently. "They're all gone," Gary replied. "But Ray needs help." Sir Kay scanned the area. Fire marks and ashes littered the ground. The trees, arranged in a rough circle, had darkened from the heat. Only the attackers' equipment remained. Picking up a fragment from the ground, Sir Kay examined it. It was a piece of the red mask Lancey had been wearing. "So it's them. I need to inform Wilfred." As Sir Kay analyzed the battlefield for Black Sash Knights, third-year students appeared. They picked up both Ray and Gary, preparing to take them somewhere. Ray's eyes grew heavy, his body screaming in pain. The last thing he could do was close them. When Ray finally opened his eyes again, the sight was familiar. White bed sheets, A clear ceiling. He was in the hospital once more. Something heavy rested on his leg. Looking down, he saw Slivia, asleep on his thigh. She's been there all night, Gary's voice came from the side. Turning to his left, Ray saw Gary also lying in a hospital bed, wrapped in several bandages. It had become a common occurrence for both of them. Just then, Slivia's eyes fluttered open. "Ray," she murmured, a bit of drool escaping the corner of her mouth. Her face flushed red as she quickly wiped it away. "Ray, you're finally awake." "How long have I been asleep?" he asked. "It's been 3 days." Ray reached up to touch his face, recalling the burn marks and the pain of his melted lips. But now he was speaking perfectly fine. Looking at his hands, he saw they were completely healed. "Don't worry, you're all healed up." "But how?" Ray asked, confused. "That's the thing, Ray. We don't really know. Your body just started to heal itself. The burn marks, your internal injuries, everything. The doctors were in shock. Your body is strange. The readings they found, it's almost like you're, Slivia hesitated. "Like what?" Ray pressed. "Your body heals like a beast would. As long as you get enough rest, your ki naturally repairs all your wounds." Slivia then met Ray's gaze. "Ray, we saw your body when you came in here. We thought you might look like that forever. What happened to you too?" Ray and Gary recounted everything. The 3 masked attackers, Lancy among them. Slivia didn't seem surprised. She explained that when the fire started, she had been attacked by one of the masked men who had gone straight for the whistle. When she and the others searched for Lancy, he was nowhere to be found, leaving them no choice but to return to the city. As the 3 of them pieced together the events, the hospital room door opened. Ray was surprised to see all their roommates enter, along with Kyle and the 2 red-headed twins from the Dragonite training. Once they had all gathered, Sir Kay stepped in and closed the door behind him. Something serious was happening, and Ray had the feeling that what